Good evening. Welcome to our study tonight. We're going to go right into In the News tonight. So let me give you the first one as we start. This category is the New World Order. And this just came out this week. GDI, Global Disinformation Index. Now this article is pretty heady and it's got a lot of verbiage. So let me just kind of sum it up for you. United Nations have a policy now. It's a proposal that outlines how to combat online misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. The policy is titled Information Integrity on Digital Platforms. What they're trying to do by 2024 is have a code of conduct that obviously their board or their regions will be able to oversee. The proposal outlines and cites organizations that have explicitly worked to censor conservatives or have advocated for the censoring of conservative viewpoints. The American public should be skeptical of any attempt by the UN to monitor, regulate, or control speech. They have a confidential exclusion list that it sells to online advertising companies for the purpose of demonetizing speech, according to the Washington Examiner. So what would that mean? Well, they released a report dubbed the Toxic 10, excuse me, calling on Facebook and Google to pull advertisements from 10 websites, including many conservative news publications that the group claims espouse climate misinformation, including Breitbart, Newsmax, The Washington Times, The Federalist Papers, The Blaze, and The Daily Wire. So obviously what they're trying to do is silence everyone that opposes anything to do with climate change. Another way to really kind of curtail our freedom of speech. Let me go a little further about the United States of Europe. Elimination of nation-state veto takes the EU closer to the United States of Europe. In what may be the beginning of the end of European nations, Germany and France are determined to reform national rights, including the EU's right of veto this year. So if you're part of the European Union, which I think is 27 nations right now, whenever they have a conclave and whenever they vote, you have the right as a nation to veto that. Now they want to stop that right and only give it to the two biggest nations. It gives the EU supreme power without the member nations questioning or vetoing rules by the European Council. This would subsequently allow the UN to enact a liberal immigration policy, green rules, and various other progressive goals without any hindrance from the other conservative nations. They want to take more and more powers away from the nation states and transfer them to Brussels to create a United States of Europe over the heads of its citizens. French leader Emmanuel Macron has long championed a greater European political community and has been calling for a true European army since he took power. This is at the heart of what John the Revelator called the revived Roman Empire, a European superpower with a powerful standing army. He mentions that in Revelation. Now with talk of a fresh desire to consolidate European political power into a more united bloc, people are starting to pay attention again, especially as it coincides with so many other important prophetic events happening, such as the shadow war between Iran and Israel, efforts to rebuild the Third Temple, the advancement of technology that can fulfill the mark of the beast, natural disasters, the global impact of disease, and a potential economic crisis, reset, and the list goes on and on. So when we talk about being close to the end, it's not just words or verbiage. We realize that things are happening at a very quick pace, and you've heard me say that before, and we're watching it do it globally. If you follow Israel, Israel attacks Jenin in biggest West Bank incursion in 20 years. Again, let me give you a summation of this. Israel has launched a brigade of Israeli troops between 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers backed by armored bulldozers and snipers on rooftops. They entered the city of Jenin and its refugee camp, and they encountered fire from the Palestinians after Israeli informed the White House of its plans. Amazingly, the White House said this: it defended Israel's right to security and was monitoring the situation on the West Bank very closely. Quote, White House spokesperson said, quote, we support Israel's security and right to defend its people against Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist groups. Britain Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, while we support Israel's right to self-defense, the protection of civilians must be practiced. So what happened? Well, there's a refugee camp that's been there in Jenin, the city of Jenin. It's in northern Gaza Strip, and it has about 11,000 people in it. But right in the heart of it, in the center of it, is a terrorist group, and they're operating from that. Israel Defense Forces and the Domestic Intelligence Service, Shin Bet, said that they had attacked a command center in the Jenin refugee camp that was used by a local militant group. It's an escalation of the violence, and Israel carried out an airstrike near a mosque in the city that it said was being used by Palestinian gunmen to target Israeli forces. So what's been happening is this group right inside that refugee camp has been having incursions into Israel and killing civilians. And basically Israel said, that's it. The Knesset said, we need to do something. So the electricity was cut off in some parts of Jenin, and military bulldozers, that's what you're seeing on the chart right now, were plowing through narrow streets, reminding that Israel's incursions of the last uprising. So Israel's serious. One Israeli official said the raid was intended to break the safe haven mindset of the camp, which had become a hornet's nest. The camp on the outskirts of the northern West Bank city was set up in the 1950s. It's a ghetto-like area, again, home to about 11,000 people, and has long been viewed as a hotbed of what Palestinians consider armed resistance and Israelis see as terrorism. The Palestinian gunmen killed 4 Israelis near a Jewish settlement in the West Bank in an attack that led to a rampage by settlers in the Palestinian villages and towns. And that's why Israel took the offensive this week. Let me go a little bit further and tell you a little bit about religion. This is interesting. The great de-churching. Americans no longer identify with the Christian faith. American identification with the Christian faith is in decline. 40 million adult Americans who used to go to church don't go anymore. The writer of Hebrews warns, "Take care, brethren, that there not be any one of you be evil, unbelieving heart that falls away from the living God." Hebrews 3:12. Many of those who have left their previously professed faith might well have been merely religious, never having been born again, and active in their social churches due to family tradition or a desire to do good, but not grounded in theology. There's other reasons also. Some believers have been so passionate about the cultural crisis they are in that they have prioritized political victory over internal values. In recent years, some of them have been more concerned with electoral outcomes than biblical faithfulness. As a result, their professed allegiance to scriptural virtues has been compromised by their desperation to save our nation. We decreed Bill Clinton's sordidness, but have made excuses when our guys, those who pledge allegiance to the things we cherish, match Clinton's manifest crudeness. Then there's the cost of being a disciple. No one wants to be misrepresented, castigated, or disliked. Yet to affirm something as simple as marriage as the union of a man and a woman can be personally and professionally costly, like the seed that fell on rocky ground. Some self-proclaimed Christians wilt under the heat of aspersion, however unjustified. With this, we're sometimes almost frantic in our efforts to be relevant. While liberal churches are eager to be seen as progressive, some evangelical churches believe that snazzy sneakers and smoke machines are more needed than sound exposition of the Word of God. While rock concert-like glitz entertains, substituting for true worship and teaching is like drinking a soft drink while eating popcorn, temporarily fulfilling and enjoyable but ultimately empty. Finally, there's our failure to adequately teach our youth not only the great truths of the faith once delivered to us, as Jude says, but why these truths are life-giving if properly understood and applied. For example, most evangelical young people, understand that they should remain sexually abstinent until marriage, but asking them why discloses a good bit of uncertainty. And as often as not, they can't articulate why they expressed convictions have a grounding in Scripture, common sense, and so forth. The bland acceptance of what has been taught won't last in this aggressive, godlessness of our time. Yes, our teens and 20-somethings know Jesus died for their sins, but what does that phrase really mean? What exactly happened on the cross? Too many are bereft of the ability to offer a clear explanation. Now for the good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is always relevant. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. Paul wrote to his young disciple Timothy. If that's true, then the field now is wide open, because the world is still full of sinners who need saving. Additionally, many churches and individual believers are doing a lot of things right. They're living faithfully, sharing the gospel, bereaving the lost and hurting, giving and serving generously, raising their kids to live for Jesus and to love Him, a tough task in our time. and generally being models, even if imperfect, of what it means to know God. But we have our work cut out for us. America is a darkening place, and it's getting darker every day. But regardless of what might happen to the nation we love, we cannot avoid the unshakable truth that God's plan for all humanity is absolutely unstoppable. Hell will not prevail against the church, and nothing is ever hopeless, not at least while Christ is our hope, Timothy tells us. And since he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, we have a great reason to trust that he'll continue to bring to himself those who are being saved. Let me give you a couple more pieces of good news, even though I have them under religion. The Supreme Court's done some amazing things this week, much to Biden and his administration's chagrin. Supreme Court: government cannot force Christian businesses to promote same-sex marriages. It is about time. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday handed a Christian website designer a historic free speech victory, ruling that the state of Colorado cannot force her to design a website celebrating same-sex weddings. It's about time that we stood by the Constitution. The landmark decision involved the Colorado graphic designer Lori Smith, who wants to expand her business into wedding websites but does not want to be forced to create sites promoting same-sex marriage. And basically, the Supreme Court said you have every right to have a business and not support something that you go against. What a great victory for Christians. Let me give you not so good news. How the Canadian media works with LGBT activists to demonize Christians. Canada has a bullseye on Christians. On June 8th, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, by the way, he's an antichrist, hosting a flag-raising ceremony on Parliament Hill. The LGBT banner was raised in front of Canada's seat of government alongside the national flag, and Trudeau warned the Assembly that the LGBT community was facing a rise in anger, hatred, and ignorance and intolerance, citing the fact that some places have decided and declined to fly the pride flag. In Trudeau's Canada, the government expects citizens to pledge allegiance to two flags rather than one, with anyone who disagrees being subject to demonization and relentless critical coverage from the taxpayer-funded media. Specifically, the press has decided to demonize churches. Headlines inform readers precisely how they're supposed to feel about this. Global News, quote, church holds influence over Ontario community that voted down pride flags, locals say. Another, inside Norwich, an Ontario town at war with the church controlling its citizens. The CBC, a small town divided over the pride flag. In every story, the narrative is the same. A church whose membership makes up about a fifth of the population is somehow oppressing the other 4/5. The stories are a toxic fusion of heresy, anti-Christian bigotry, and misleading quotes, creating a narrative that the LGBT activists presumably hope will be helpful with their human rights complaint. Canada has been post-Christian for several generations now, and journalists appear genuinely shocked and outraged to discover there are still people who hold the beliefs that Christians have held for 2,000 years, and that a majority of Canadians in many non-white immigrant communities still hold. Sunday shopping bans only disappeared a few decades ago. Two Canadian journalists, though, found it so strange that many stores in Norwich chose to close on Sundays that they began their stories with breathtaking descriptions that read like something out of a foreign correspondence report from a foreign and frightened land. From Jessica Smith of the Canadian Press on May 10th. On a recent weekday afternoon, the main streets of Norwich Township were bustling with people chatting at a local cafe, eating at a deli, or browsing through shops. But residents say that all that changes on Sundays, when the community is in southwestern Ontario, largely closes for the Christian day of rest, clinging to a practice generally abandoned across the province since the early 1990s, when the government scrapped mandatory Sunday closures. Residents say it's this wealthy church that has created a bleed between theocratic rule and secular politics. What a lie. Theocratic rule means that you're ruled by one religious body. There is no city in Canada ruled by a religious body. And they say they're shunning the LGBTQ2 community and demanding recreation and business shutter on Sundays, even though Sunday shopping has been legal in the province for decades. The reason why they shut down is because they're Christians, not because they're going against anyone, but they believe it's a day of rest. But it's not mandatory that anybody shuts down. There are business owners that do open on Sundays, such as Tito's Pizza and Godfather's. They have no seizures from a church. Stewart's real implication is that Christians participating in democracy at all is theocratic bleed. What a lie. This is an obvious attempt to make religious community that wants to be left alone sound like the mullahs of Iran. The alleged journalist then features a series of quotes from Norwich residents who clearly dislike the church in general and Christian beliefs in particular. Listen to this. Scott Takacs, who is described as a realtor who lives in Norwich and with his husband Chris, is quoted as saying that Norwich is a backwater spithole because it does not feature the LGBT flags that have become ubiquitous in other municipalities. It's an odd way for a realtor to describe the community he works in. Here's my opinion. If you don't like the Christian community to live in, move and stop making money off the Christian homes that you sell. It's easy to quote people who don't like something. Additionally, 2 topless women show up every Sunday morning in front of the church and flash their breasts at families with children arriving for morning services. How could you tell me this is not against the law? How could you tell me this is allowed? This is framed not as activists targeting a religious group, but as a legitimate protest. As Global put it, come Sunday, 2 topless women standing outside Norwich Community Church, draped in pride flags, as churchgoers arrive for the morning service. Afterwards, they plaster fake snow clearing and garage sale signs around the town, adorned with pride flags. We just want inclusivity, said Jennifer St. Pierre, wearing a rainbow-colored tutu as she sticks a rainbow-colored cross to a signpost. She says the church can't control us. The church isn't trying to control anybody. They're just worshiping the way they believe. So as the conservative Christian denomination ended its morning services Sunday, Martha McDonald stood outside the property topless with a sign that read, "The shirt goes on when the flag goes up." That is absolutely ludicrous. McDonald is openly admitting that she is harassing a church, going families by exposing herself to them, including many children, for political ends. Yet the coverage she has received for her indecent protest is positive. If topless women were protesting a mosque or a synagogue or a temple, I suspect the reaction from the press would be markedly differently. As an adult weaponizing nudity against families with children for the self-confessed purpose of political harassment would not be accepted or lauded in any other circumstance. That's right. Christians have a definite mark on them. Norwich is not the only jurisdiction to limit which flags can fly on municipal property. There are several others. Rhonda Jebbinsville in the Ontario municipality of Chatham-Kent put a motion forward in April which has since failed. Jubenville received a flood of hate, including 2 death threats from LGBT supporters. She noted she even had a witch's spell cast on her, all because she felt our 3 governmental flags are what is needed outside municipal centers. Why would I now, she said, as a counselor, feel compelled to support some of these groups that wish me death and hate over a flag? The case study of the media and activists partnering to target a single church in a small community for their Christian beliefs to create a scapegoat for a town council decision they disagree with is a microcosmic example of how much of the Canadian press works. You want to be a Christian in Canada? Then basically you're going to get flack. And if you want to be a church in Canada, you're going to get protests over and over again. Shocking. Jeopardy's had its problems in the recent past, but 3 Jeopardy finalists were unable to fill in the blank in this question. Our Father, who art in heaven, blank be thy name. Let me repeat that. 3 finalists were unable to fit it. They stared blankly. Our Father, who art in heaven, blank be thy name. That says a whole lot about America. Obviously, it's hallowed be thy name. As we go on to moral decay, scary hate speech law in Michigan would see prison time for misgendering. The state of Michigan is moving swiftly to make it a crime to say anything, actually anything, if someone else then claims they feel threatened by your words. It's exactly what the United States Supreme Court just said this week the state cannot do. I just read it to you. At issue is a legislative proposal there to make it a felony if one person says something and another person claims to feel threatened by their words. Can you believe this? The plan has passed the House and was pending before the Senate approval. There would advance the speech limiting program to the governor. It's called HB 4474. It was created specifically to limit all discussion and comments about sexual orientation and gender identity or expression. If it passes and a person is found guilty, there would be a $10,000 fine for every infraction, and there would be a prison sentence. Many conservatives have voiced concerns that the bill infringes on America's First Amendment rights. One problem for the state, however, and it's timely, is this week's U.S. Supreme Court ruling that I just read to you. In a case against Colorado brought by a man convicted there of threatening speech. The ruling, written by left-leaning Justice Elena Kagan, this is a left-leaning judge, she said, the state must show that the defendant consciously disregarded a substantial risk that his communication would be viewed as threatening violence. Justice Center pointed out the decision in the court, which was 7-2, once again explicitly affirmed the long-standing principle that statutes which punish pure speech violate the First Amendment. It's about time. I'm getting really excited about our Supreme Court because they're starting to stand up for everything you and I believe. Along those same lines, let me tell you what they did also this week. Under good news, Supreme Court strikes down college affirmation action programs. The Supreme Court on Thursday struck down affirmative action programs at the University of North Carolina and Harvard in a major victory for conservative activists, ending the systematic consideration of race in the admissions process. The court ruled that both programs violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution and are therefore unlawful. The decision was hailed by prominent conservatives who say the Constitution should be colorblind, and it should. Liberals, however, condemned the ruling, saying affirmative action is a key tool for remedying historic race discrimination. President Joe Biden called the decision a severe disappointment. I hope he gets more of them, adding that his administration will provide guidance about how colleges should maintain diversity without violating the rule. Let me tell you how I feel. Look, it was unfair from the get-go to have affirmative action. We should admit those to college who are most qualified, not the most black or the most white or the most brown or the most yellow. That's in the news for tonight. I'm going to go right into John chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. This is week number 20. Before I do that, let me give you one announcement while everybody's on now. This Sunday at 2 p.m., we're going to have an Israeli November trip meeting at the Healing Place Church, 2 p.m. for those who are wanting to go to Israel in November. So far, I think they have about 20 people signed up. If you're interested, you need to come and show up at 2 p.m. We'll answer all the questions and tell you where they're going and what that trip's going to be like. All right.